Good morning and welcome to the very last episode of Mrs. Jensen's audiobook reading for the Odyssey. We are on episode 5. It's Odysseus' return and revenge. So let's start with where we pick up. Odysseus has finally reached home to Ithaca after a brutal 10-year-long journey home. With 10 years of fighting in the Trojan War, it has been 20 years since Odysseus has seen his homeland. First, he reunites with his son Telemachus, who can hardly recognize his father after 20 years. Telemachus lets Odysseus know that while he's been away, many men have been living in his palace, eating his food and wine, and attempting to marry his wife Penelope. These suitors are dangerous men who plan to steal the kingdom from Odysseus, who is presumed dead. Penelope, Odysseus' wife, has remained faithful after all these years and has refused to choose a new suitor to marry. However, the suitors have developed an evil plan to kill Telemachus and force Penelope to marry in order to steal Odysseus' title and land. Odysseus and Telemachus come up with a plan to return to the palace and take revenge on the suitors. They even have a little extra help from the goddess Athena, who helps create the plan and magically transforms Odysseus' appearance into an old beggar so that he can enter the palace unnoticed. Disguised as an old beggar, and with the magical help of Athena, Telemachus and Odysseus enter the palace to take revenge on the suitors and reclaim his rightful spot as king of Ithaca. Bright-eyed Athena then placed inside the heart of wise Penelope, Icarus's daughter, the thought that she should set up in Odysseus' hall the bow and gray iron axes for the suitors as a competition and prelude to their deaths. Penelope goes to the storage chamber and collects Odysseus' bow and his axes. Once the lovely lady reached the suitors, she stood beside the doorpost of the well-constructed hall, a bright veil covering her face. On either side stood loyal attendant women. Then Penelope addressed the suitors with these words: "Listen to me, bold suitors, who've been ravaging this home with your incessant need for food and drink, now that my husband's been away so long. The only story you could offer up as an excuse is that you all desire to marry me and take me as your wife. So come now, suitors, since I seem to be the prize you seek, I'll place this great bow here, a weapon that belonged to brave Odysseus. Whichever one of you can grip this bow and string it with the greatest ease, then shoot an arrow through 12 axes, all of them. I'll go with him, leaving my married home, this truly lovely house, and all these goods one needs for living, things I'll remember even in my dreams." As she said this, Telemachus quickly threw off his purple cloak covering his back, then jumped up and removed the sharp sword hanging from his shoulders. He set up the axes by digging out a trench, one lengthy ditch for all of them in a straight line. Then his feet trampled the earth down flat around them. Amazement gripped the suitors as they looked at him and watched how he aligned those axes properly, though before then he had never even seen them. Then the lead suitor, Antinous, addressed them. "All you suitors, get up in order now, from left to right, beginning from the place where the steward pours the wine." Antinous spoke, and what he had proposed they found agreeable. The first to stand was Leotus. He always sat furthest away, beside the lovely mixing bowl. That was the man who first picked up the bow and the swift arrow. After moving to the threshold and standing there, he tried the bow, but he could not string it. His hands, which were quite delicate and feeble, grew weary before he could succeed in hooking up the string. This said, Antinous called out to Melanthius, the goatherd. "Come now, Melanthius, light a fire in the hall, set a large chair in front of it, and spread a fleece across, and fetch a hefty piece of fat. There's some inside the house, so these young men here can warm the bow and rub grease into it, then test the bow and end this competition." Odysseus, a crafty man who had a scheme in mind, spoke out. "Suitors of the splendid queen, listen to me, so I can say what the heart here in my chest is prompting me to state. It's a request, a plea, especially to Eurymachus and godlike Antinous, since what he said was most appropriate. For the moment you should postpone this business with the bow and turn the matter over to the gods. Give me the polished bow, so in this hall I can test these hands of mine and find out if my supple limbs still possess the strength they used to have, or if my wandering and my lack of food have quite destroyed it." Odysseus finished. They were extremely angry, fearing that a beggar might string the polished bow. So Lord Antinous, addressing him directly, took Odysseus to task. "You wretched stranger, your mind lacks any sense. You've none at all. Aren't you content to share a feast with us, such noble men, without being disturbed or lacking any food? and to listen to the words we speak to one another? Wise Penelope then answered him and said, Antinous, it's neither good nor proper to deny guests of Telemachus a chance, no matter who it is who comes to this house. And if, trusting in his strength and power, the stranger strings Odysseus' great bow, do you believe this man will take me home and make me his wife? I'm sure he himself bears no such hope inside that chest of his. So none of you should be at dinner here with sorrow in your heart because of him. That would show you all lack sense of honor. Odysseus already had the bow. He was turning it this way and that, testing it different ways to see if, while its lord was gone, worms had nibbled on the horns. Shrewd Odysseus, once he had raised the weapon and looked it over from every angle, then, as someone truly skilled at playing the harp and singing has no trouble when he loops a taut string around a brand new peg, tying the twisted string down at either end, that's how easily Lord Odysseus strung that bow. Holding it in his right hand, he tested the string. Then he picked up an arrow lying by itself on the table beside him. He set it against the bow on the bridge, pulled the notched arrow and the bowstring back, still sitting in his seat, and with a sure aim let it fly. It did not miss. Not even a single hole in all the axe heads. The arrow, weighted down with bronze, sped straight on through and out the other end. At that point, Odysseus called out to his son, Telemachus, the stranger sitting in your halls has not disgraced you. I did not miss my aim or work too long to string that bow. My strength is still intact, in spite of all the suitors' scornful gibes. Now it's time to get a dinner ready for these Aeaeans. There's still some light, then entertain ourselves in different ways, with singing and the lyre, for these are things which should accompany a dinner feast. As he spoke, he gave a signal with his eyebrows. Telemachus, godlike Odysseus' dear son, cinched his sword belt, closed his fists around a spear, moved in close behind his father, next to his seat, and stood there, fully armed with gleaming bronze. Odysseus spoke. Telemachus obeyed the orders of his dear father. He hurried to the storeroom where they kept their splendid weapons. From there he took 4 shields, 8 spears, and 4 helmets made of bronze, with thick horsehair plumes. He went out carrying these and made his way back quickly to his dear father. First he armed himself with bronze around his body, and the 2 servants did the same, dressing themselves in dazzling armor. Then they went to take their place in the doorway beside skilled and shrewd Odysseus, who, as long as he had arrows to protect him, continued shooting at the suitors in his home, killing them one by one. As his arrows hit them, they fell down in heaps. But once he'd used his arrows, the king could shoot no more. So then he propped the bow against the doorpost of the well-constructed wall and let it lean beside the shining entrance. Then with his fist, he grabbed 2 heavy bronze-tipped spears. Odysseus then began to search the house to check if anyone was hiding there, still alive, trying to escape his own murky fate. But every man he looked at, and there were many, had fallen in blood and dust, like fish, which in the meshes of a net sailors have pulled from the gray sea up on the curving beach, lying piled up on the sand, longing for sea waves, while a bright sun drains away their life. That is how the suitors were heaped up, piled on one another. And that's the end of the Odyssey.